Okay, we're close to the end of the day. Please, you're in for a real treat. As I was explaining, my name is Raul Ayala. I'm a Deputy Federal Public Defender. I've been working these programs now for about 7 years. I got the best job in my office. This is all I do. I do a pretrial diversion program called GASA that Judge Phillips mentioned earlier. And I do a post-conviction drug court called STAR, Substance Abuse Treatment and Reentry, which was actually our first program there. And then attorney, the U.S. attorney, now Judge Barat, said we should do this at the front end. It was like music to my ears, and sure enough, true to his word, he put that in motion, and here we are 7 years later doing our program. So this is we believe to be a very informative how-to, or what you can expect from these programs. We know that there's primarily, we have 2 federal judges and a local treatment provider. We're going to try to cover all our bases. Obviously, it's a little bit federal top heavy. We're going to talk a little bit about the juvenile justice side of these programs and, of course, the therapeutic side. And Judge Aiken, who's, many of you may know Judge Aiken, she's a pioneer of these programs. She's been doing this since 2005 in the District of Oregon. Before that, she was a state court judge in juvenile court, so she really knows what she's talking about. She's got a lot of experience, a lot of evidence-based information she's going to share by way of a PowerPoint. And with us also is Colleen Smith, who's a licensed MSW, works for a local program in Newark as a social worker and a program manager for misdemeanors out of the Newark area. And then we have a federal judge from the Southern District of Florida and Miami, Judge Ursula Ungaro, who has been doing their post-conviction care court, which is a reentry court in Miami now, off and on for about 3 years, and now has been assigned to do that or has taken on that assignment. So you're going to have different levels of experience, and then we'll set aside some time for some question and answers. So I'm going to ask Colleen to first tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Great. My name is Colleen Smith. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I work at Newark Community Solutions. It's a demonstration project of the Center for Court Innovation in Newark, New Jersey. We are New Jersey's first community court. A community court is a problem-solving court at the municipal level. So my program provides the judges with sentencing alternatives by way of community service and social service in lieu of jail time or fines for low-level offenses. We see predominantly drug cases, but we also work with folks who've been arrested for different quality of life crimes like drinking in public, jumping turnstiles, and then we also see property crimes, and we're starting to see some more traffic cases that are getting referred to our program as well. We deliver all of our services on site. So I have 2 social workers who work full-time in our clinic, a part-time case manager, and then an army of MSW and BSW interns who complete intakes, who develop individualized case plans, and then monitor program participation, and then we report that information to our colleagues who are working in the courts, who relay information to the judge. I think that the power of a lot of the work that we do in a community court is that our program isn't means tested. So as long as folks meet the criterion to the criminal charges will meet our criteria, then we can provide services. So a lot of times we're working with folks who may not have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, may not have ever had a conversation about substance use disorders, and we're the first people who are able to have that conversation with them. We see about 1,200 cases annually, and we do very short-term engagement because we're working with people who have been convicted on low-level offenses. So clients are typically doing 6 mandate days in our program and completing their engagement with the court and with NCS within a month. And that's it. I'm here to answer any questions, and I'll get into some of the details later on. It's really in there. It's on, I think.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Thankfully, the crowd thinned out. I'm sort of the neophyte here. But first, I want to thank Rabbi Lipskar for bringing me here. It's really been a terrific conference. I've learned a lot. And I want to recognize John Minnelli, who's sitting over there. He is a supervisory probation officer from my district who works with me and my colleagues in our reentry court. So I think the panel's sort of a mixed bag. You've got a clinician here. Having a clinician sounds like a great luxury to me. You've got Judge Aiken here, who you're going to hear from in a minute, who's been doing reentry for 14 years. I've been doing it off and on, probably for about 18 months, and my court's been doing reentry for about 3 years. We are very much in an experimental phase. We do have a paradigm. We focus on moderate to high-risk offenders. Our program is a point-based program. If our offenders, who we call returning citizens, accumulate points and ultimately graduate from the program in about a year to 18 months if they're successful. We have a cognitive behavioral therapy component. We use MRT, which is the same CBT program that Judge Aiken uses. We also have court sessions initially twice a month with our returning citizens where we work with individually work with them on housing issues, employment issues, child custody, child support, health, medical resource issues, you name it. We have a very big network of volunteer services which we make available to our returning citizens, provided they're complying with our program. Before every session, we have a team meeting. We have a team that consists of assistant U.S. attorneys, federal public defenders, community resource officers who work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we go over each case individually. We talk about what's been, with the probation officers, what's been accomplished since we last saw the individual, what kinds of issues we want to address, and so on. So again, we're experimenting. Fortunately, we're part of a quality improvement program that the Federal Judicial Center is sponsoring. And we also are meeting once a month with our facilitators from that program to continually try to work on improving it. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Judge Aiken and also from Colleen, but Judge Aiken, because she's a veteran and she really seems to know what she's doing.
Right. But it's true. Judge Aiken?
Number one, first, it's an incredible honor to be here, and I can't tell you how excited I was just to get a chance to listen to everybody and steal all the best stuff. You know, I'm out in a little house in the prairie in Oregon, so all the big city stuff is what's going back to my hometown. But really, honestly, it's a privilege to be able to work on these issues, and it's been the joy of my life to be a part of the whole reentry movement. But I also have to give a huge shout out to the FJC. If it weren't for the FJC's initial involvement in bringing us together, so many years ago, 15 or so years ago, and sticking with it, and I give Barbara Rothstein a huge shout out for her work, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I want to tell you that really, I came from the state court system, and part of that state court position, I was a juvenile judge, and I tell people often I'm one of the few people in the country recruited to the federal bench because I did work with children. So I tell people my day job is repairing damaged adults, but my real passion is growing healthy children. So waxing in and out of things, I want to say that I spend my free time working with the Relief Nursery and Early Intervention Program for Kids of Abuse and Neglect with therapeutic preschools, and we've grown that all over the state of Oregon, and our hope is to be the first infrastructure for services for kids at risk of abuse and neglect in the country. So that's, that model has really informed how we do the work in our reentry court. So when I went to this federal court in 1998, what we were doing is 1, 2, 3 back to prison, and I saw that as absolute failure. And that for 20 years, judges didn't have to know anything about the human condition, behavioral sciences, neurosciences, anything about people, because it was all about a sentencing guideline chart. And so my belief is that what the FJC has done and what this sort of underground movement has accomplished is we're back to talking about people. And that's what we're about, changing people. And that was mentioned by the Attorney General, and I couldn't be happier to hear somebody talk in those terms. Our program was developed using, really honestly, the relief nursery model and work from juvenile court, and that is when you bring people together and put them in a room and you say, what do you need? How can we help you? How do we get you from this month to next month and meet their needs and meet their services and get trust and buy-in and their opportunity to give us the barriers to their success? We do about 3 things. Number 1, we break down the system so it's not so silo-driven. Number 2, we actually deal with individual problems and design programs around individualized service delivery needs. And 3, we find out where the gaps are and where things aren't working. And what, as a judge, what better tool than to have people come and tell you to your face what works and what doesn't work, as opposed to everybody coming in and frankly blowing smoke up your robe about what everything's great, this is great, and they don't talk about what's real. And so truth, transparency, trust, and try are the 4 hallmarks of our program. And if you want to put up the little PowerPoint, I'm going to run through this because I brought it. And I'm going to talk about some of the add-ons, the things we've learned in the 14 years we've been doing this work. We have a team, and so we've had, I'm going to tell you what the best part about having a reentry program and the strength of it is we have changed how sentencings are done. We have changed how we intervene in the lives of people, and we've changed literally the criminal justice behavioral models in our state. And it's because people can't kid kidders anymore. It's just not words, it's really about human beings. So if you wouldn't mind bearing with me, I'll run through this. Okay, thanks. Because I want to get to the good stuff. So most of you all know this information, but it's really important to take a look at the dramatic impact and the growth of prisons and the costs. I mean, it's extraordinary. 500% increase over the last 40 years. You look next at the cost of incarceration, and these are just numbers that really cannot, they have to be, every conference like this has to see the numbers. I mean, just it's imperative. But this is the chart that should have everybody hyperventilating. Costs of prisons over education. I don't know about you, I raised 5 boys, and I sure wanted them to have an education. I didn't want them to have a prison bed. And education makes all the difference in the world, but that's a study that doesn't include Oregon, but I know Oregon's numbers are no better off than this, but this should have everybody in this room hyperventilating. These are 12 facts, you know, and you can look at this PowerPoint later, but these are just facts that come out of what we've learned about reentry. I do this presentation often for the community because when you get out and talk about our work, it makes a big difference to the community. So here's what we found when we arrived at the federal court in 1998. I don't know about you, but this is sure failure to me, absolute failure. And I agree with Judge Gertner, and that is, when did we ever do a study of the effectiveness of the Bureau of Prisons? I would sure like to see it. So here's our reentry court. These are all the services that back in the day led us to believe that we had to do something different. So people were going in and out and in and out and in and out of our system. And so reentry was built on the back end of the prison system. And it was, I'll give credit without a shout out to Steve Wax, who's the federal public defender, when we started talking at a major conference that we put on. And if you want to read anything about how we put this all together, it's found on our website for the District of Oregon Probation Department Reentry Studies. So we did a study of how we did this, why we did this, and the conference we put on. And we went back to the information that the judges have the power when people come out of prison to determine what happens. We don't have to have permission from the U.S. Attorney to do anything, and that if we started at the back end, we could build an infrastructure of services that when people were in those services, we could prove that they made a difference, and then we could start moving in people at the front end, and surely over time we would rebuild our system. So evidence-based practices are a big model in the state system and very important, but the federal system, my probation chief didn't know what I was talking about when I said we need to build an evidence-based program for this one part of the community, and he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I got him up, drove him with our team of people over to the relief nursery and said, this is what happens when you do evidence-based work, you have data outcome, and you prove to the community you can make a difference. This is what the community will do with and for you. So there's a big discussion about how do you build programs. How do you build programs in the Federal Judicial Center or in the state system when their programs have never existed before? So this is the way in which we developed our program. Best evidence that we can locate, client values, what the expectations are, what we want to see them accomplish, and then our individual experience and bringing the right talent to the table. Then looking at risk, our system in the federal system is risk, need, responsivity. So we use many risk factor calculations. There's a federal tool and we use it strategically. And then there's the needs, and we sit down and we work with people so we know what their needs are, and it's family needs. It's all the way across the board. What do they really need and what can we provide? And then responsivity, and responsivity is key. So what really happened in our reentry court that meets once a month, we have pre-meetings. I hold 2 reentry sessions, 3 hours, one in Eugene and then 1 in 3 hours south in Medford with a very difficult population. And we meet once a month and stay up on top of everybody. But what we found out was our people need things between those 30 days. So we gave out all of our cell phone numbers. Now, mind you, I'm 1 cell phone removed, but I'm like a 7-Eleven. If they need something, they can call the person who they feel comfortable with, and that information will get to me and I can make a decision. So we're immediately responsive to what their needs are. This is just a chart that we kind of updated because, the data, how do you get data? You have to get data from the FBI. So we've started to figure out keeping our own data. And so if on the, below is our risk scores, so 1 through 9. 9 are the highest risk offenders, 1 is the lowest risk. We almost never take a 1 or a 2, but we'll start taking a 3 if they have, particularly if they have family or complex kid issues, and up to a 4 and 5. And as you can see, the gold is the national number, the green is the District of Oregon, and the impact we've had with our numbers in the reentry court is the blue number. And what I will tell you is oftentimes we end up, the revocations are not to send them back to prison. We rarely have to do that, but it's to revoke them so we have more time to work with them because they're running out of time. Our participants have to apply. There's a contract. They sign a contract. They have expectations to meet. You can have the contract. We have it on our website. But they have to meet certain expectations, and they have to be clean and sober, no dirty UAs, and no testing positive for a year solid. And if they use, they start over again. There's our team, and we add to our team on a regular basis as we see a need. These are all the programs that are available on an individual need. We're not cookie cutters. We're going to do something individual for the person to break the barriers. All those services are available, one-stop shop. I have a trained social worker as a probation officer running my reentry court program in Eugene, and in Medford, I have a longtime probation officer who they consider to be almost their mom. She's just amazing. For a period of time, we had a 2.3-acre garden. It was one of the most amazing tools. We grew food for the underserved in Lane County. We have the number 2 in the country, highest rate of, it's unbelievable, food insecurity for children. So it was a big deal, and we have another garden that we're going into effect, but it brought everybody. It's about building community. These are the risk factors. You all know that we take a look at it, and I would tell you, I have a whole theory about how we need to look at talking about recidivism differently, and it involves Michael Lewis, and if you want to hear about that, talk to me later because I'm going to take too much time to get into that. But I have a really wonderful theory about how we ought to be talking about this issue, and it comes from his wonderful books. So this is really how we take a look at the principles of intervening, the who and the what. And as Nancy Gertner said, she doesn't ever ask the why. I've always asked why. Why are you here in juvenile court? Why are you not in school? Why? We have to start asking why. And then we take a look at their supervision, and the round circles are what levels we need and to work with and what we can add. And all of the client responsivity factors, we try to address all those issues. And again, in another volume and another lecture, if you want me to talk about how I use the Brene Brown series on the power of vulnerability, or the gifts of imperfection, and how that's made such a difference in talking to people and getting them to understand we're no different than they are. I have a whole other lecture on that. But these are the add-ons that I wanted to get to. So one of the things I would tell you that's been remarkable is I have had an education specialist, in addition to cognitive, MRT, cognitive work. I have an education specialist who's come for 11 years for free. I worked with her in juvenile court. She has worked all over the country. And she does a test on our folks if they're agreeable and really interested in wanting to really make a difference, and it's called the structure of intellect, and it's the 26 ways the brain takes in, processes, stores, retrieves, and uses information. It was developed by the military. There's a really amazing story by Dr. Guilford at USC, because they would take high IQ pilots, put them in a simulator, and think they'd chosen the right people, and they were crashing simulators. And so they had to design a test that dealt with perception, the vision system tied to the brain. Big shout out to Nancy Gertner when she asked a couple of questions about the sentencing guidelines. If you don't have to know about human behavior and neuroscience or behavior period, you need to understand that we've missed like 20 years worth of understanding where that body of literature is. And her program at Harvard with the law school and the medical school on law, brain, and behavior is extraordinary and needs to be replicated, and expanded opportunities for judges to go to. So what we have been doing is we've been testing these guys, are people who, I'm going to tell you, they're brilliant. They should be in the workforce. You can't figure out what happened to them. And basically we find out there are things that happened when they were school-aged that they ended up leaving school. And most of them, a lot of them can't read. So we, out of the 11 years she's worked with me and doing the testing, only 9 of them have had a diploma. The rest have either never finished school or never gotten a GED, or maybe gotten a GED. So we use that. That intervention alone has just, I have people going to college now who never thought they had a chance to go to school, because we've been able to get them vision therapy, get them into some of the auditory processing issues, addressing some of their needs. The second thing that I would tell you, it was touched on earlier, and that's the trauma-informed care. I have a trauma-informed specialist at the table now. And this book, I consider it legal malpractice if people are doing sentencings in my courtroom and have not understood or read this book, as just a start. And the start of this study is it's the ACE study, which, as you know, is the Adverse Childhood Experiences and Studies. And it was done in about 1995 to 97. And it should have been heralded as groundbreaking as the study on tobacco. And it should have been a national agenda to address the issues related to child abuse. And it's been sitting really kind of on a shelf, not being really implemented in the kind of magnitude it should have been. And now I think it's a big deal to be talking about it, because, as most of you know, 95% of the people who stand in front of us for sentencing are victims of child abuse and neglect, or household dysfunction, and all the features of ACE. I mean, you could just start doing ACE scores on our people, and you could see exactly where we should be growing healthy children, not repairing damaged adults. So I've been privileged to work with Dr. Alicia Moreland, who's a psychiatrist and addiction specialist at OHSU. She runs the Abel Gordley Center for Healing. She has a book coming out. You could watch for it. It's in my cart for Amazon. I bought it. It's called Training for Change, Transforming Systems to be Trauma-Informed, Culturally Responsive, and Neuroscience Scientifically Focused. And so she's now doing trainings and doing work with a grant in Portland with the state system on trauma-informed care, and has presented at Judge Gertner's program. So that's been a really big deal. The last thing I want to talk about, the innovation, is acute responsivity. This is a slide I took to Reinvent Law Silicon Valley that Dan Katz put on, begging for someone to help me, because responsivity, just giving them my cell phone's not enough. What we need to do is train the guys who are coming out of prison, men or women, who had no idea what a cell phone was or how to use it and how to use technology. And I did this mock-up slide, and I said, somebody help me design this, somebody help me create this. We went down Silicon Valley, of course, they had 500 people there, people with more money than God, looking for the next problem to solve. And as my Dan Katz, who teaches at Chicago Kent Law School and has a PhD, said to me, Aiken, you got problems. You bring those problems, bring one down and see if we can't get somebody to help you solve it. So I went down and I said, I want something. And then we went back to New York, and then through the good graces of Mark Sherman and the fact that the ABA Law Journal highlighted Mike Kingery with what he had done with an app, we connected, and we've been at his R&D as he's developed this incredible app. So I want to juxtapose an ankle bracelet that tracks people, that was designed for cows and has never been upgraded to do anything on the benefit of people, just this smartphone app that's $1 a day, $2 if you have a breathalyzer. And what it does is the features are able to allow people to put in all their appointments, all their medications. It tracks them. Probation officers can have a facial recognition, have FaceTime with them. My goal is to be user-friendly, not agency easy. So schlepping people into the courthouse to meet with them is not helpful when they barely are making living to take care of their families. So if you can video conference with them using a smartphone and it blocks it in, then you've got an opportunity to do something different. All those features are there. We call it and he's now got a tether, so it's tied to your, it's a wristband, it's tied to your heart rate. So it's individual and it's unique to you. And if you take it off, everybody knows. If you put it on somebody else, they're going to know. But it's tethered, so we call it a crimbit. And what we've done is we've changed how people look at being part of supervision. Instead of a probation officer saying, I'm going to come to your house, and they go, oh my God, what have I done wrong? They look down at their crimbit and they go, oh, didn't miss a UA, made all my appointments, everything's clean, I don't have anything to worry about. So our whole goal has been to try to get them to understand that we're not here to trip them up, we're here to help them. So these are just some of the features. It's, again, tracks everybody. It's all on there on a record. It's made for you. Probation officers can actually do more FaceTime with their people. You talk about pretrial. Think of the people you can put on this app and follow. And there's a really fabulous feature that's geofencing, so that if you have a victim on the other side, you can't go near that person and the phones will alert. It's much more secure than having a restraining order, because the alerts go out to everyone and someone can move away, or someone can call the police, or the police will be alerted. How it works for the offender is they can do all their stuff really on the phone. There's a breathalyzer. It's $2 a day to have that. So if you have people using alcohol and you have a concern about it, they can blow, and it's, again, facial recognition. And now the bands are becoming so sophisticated that they'll be able to pick up different types of drugs through the use of the band. The other problem is if you take some medications, I mean, think about if you shoot up something significant and your heart rate goes way high, as it does on my watch when I have an episode of arrhythmia, you can call and say, hey, what are you doing? Get on the phone and let's see what's going on. And they'll go, oh, congratulations, you're having a baby. Your heart rate went up. Or, you're in a back alley with a light under a spoon. Maybe we should have you come in, or we are going to now have to do something different. So, I mean, there's just strategies, just knowing what the heart rate's doing. So why is it different? This whole thing's been built around incentives. And what I would tell you, when I go back to everything, when we first put our reentry court program together, it took them a year to write the agreement. Because everybody's worried about the sanctions. And I sat back and laughed and waited. Sanctions, they can do this stuff on their head. It's incentives. So we work really hard to give incentives to people that really just have never had folks believe in them or give them the opportunities for success. So what we're doing is we provide those incentives, and there are patterns that we can recognize, and we address them. And our hope is we'll gamify this whole app as we get a break to do it. Because, again, the world we're going to deal with are younger and hipper and using technology, so we need to stay current. I think one of the things that has made me really devoted to this is I don't think people understand yet that we tell our phone enough information that generally it can disrupt episodes where people are off their meds, or they're bipolar, or they're having difficulties. Suicides are a big issue, huge issue. I sit on a Lines for Life, which is suicide prevention and drug and alcohol work, and the epidemic is astounding. So this was a program we worked with University of Tel Aviv, and they developed this app feature that was in place. And the irony is that the technology now is moving so fast that they were already gobbled up by somebody else. So this is where things are going and where things are happening, and the more technology opportunities we can use to put our people in a different place where they can work and meet their obligations, and at the same time learn how the system functions in a technologically advancing world, the more apt they are to be successful. This is just, we got some recognition from Harvard as an innovator for the app. And what I'd like to say about Mike Kingery is there are other people doing lots of work in this arena, and more power to him, but what I've appreciated about working with him is it's all about changing behavior and getting people the help that they need when they need it, as quickly as they need it. He's been very responsive. He's in 47 states and 16 countries. And we were doing some work. There was a big RFP for the reentry courts across the country to do an app. And, well, elections have consequences and things change. So that stopped, but I think the movement is just so clear that using technology in this fashion is where we need to be, that I have every reason to believe that whether it's Mike or somebody else, we'll be doing business differently, and I think the data that we will get from this information will drive, I think, agendas for years to come. So sorry to machine gun you verbally. I didn't want to really do that, but it's really not that hard. Frankly, talking to our people in our reentry court and just being a person with them in the room, it has been the greatest CLE education on a monthly basis. I've done this for 14 years. I've missed 3 sessions in 14 years because it is so important to be consistent and to work to develop this right, because so many people count on us getting it done right.
Thank you. So obviously a pioneer, a lot of experience, a lot of resources that she's developed. But what about some of the other programs, and what distance do you see, or what resources do you think you would need to get anywhere near Judge Aiken's program? I'm putting you right on the spot.
Yes, you are. Yes. So, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that our program was started by one of my colleagues, Patricia Seitz, and she looked at your program and many of the programs around the country, and we took what we thought was the most valuable, which looks a lot like yours, frankly. And so thank you very much. The challenge, we're having a lot of challenges, and maybe Judge Aiken can help us with recruitment. We don't use a formal contract, but our probation officers, like John, go and meet with moderate to high-risk offenders who are leaving the residential reentry centers and offer them the program. We have not had, like I said earlier, the program has requirements, and we are not having as much success as we would hope to have in terms of buy-in. So we have the capacity in Miami, for instance, to handle maybe 15 returning citizens. I think the most we've ever had at one point in time is about 8. And right now, actually, we're down to 4 active. We have some people who are on hold because the requirements interfere sometimes with work. So that's where we are right now. We also had some trouble with buy-in with our colleagues. I'm sure Judge Aiken experienced this also. Perhaps Colleen on her court also sees this, which is many of my colleagues were of the mind that I'm not a social worker. This isn't what we're here for. And it took us a lot of effort to sell the program and turn the program from a pilot program into a permanent program because of that. We were very fortunate to go to a FJC program and learn how popular and prevalent alternative courts are becoming. And fortunately, my more conventional colleagues are persuaded by hearing that things are mainstream. And so when we were able to point out that reentry had become mainstream, suddenly we had buy-in.
So Colleen?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit, as I am a social worker, and oftentimes end up in somewhat adversarial maybe situations, right, where people assume that perhaps my professional or clinical opinion is soft or ineffective. And so I think a lot of, what we did when we came into Newark 8 years ago, it predated me at NCS, but, we understood that we were asking folks to do more work, that in the beginning, we're pulling more cases, the court administrators are doing more, it was intensive. And a lot of times, I have to say that it was our clients, I think, who helped in building some of that buy-in with our court partners. We did a lot of essay writing in our courtroom, and our clients oftentimes would have to sit, reflect, speak about what their experience was, what they learned, where I see myself in 5 years. And in reading, and they would read these essays in open court, and I think that humanizing the folks who are coming through our program really helped some of our court officers and the court admins to see the impact of what we did. As a professional and as their colleague, these were also stories that I often had to highlight, and taking the moment and taking the time to reflect on just what we were asking people to do. And that happens with judges too, and I know I'm speaking, not many social workers in the room, and so I understand, I'm trained in vicarious trauma. I'm trained in how to create opportunities for my students and my staff to infuse self-care into the work that we do, and I don't think that happens in law. And so part of it too is sitting down with folks and saying, well, what do you do when you go home after a particularly difficult day? And how do you handle this? And that kind of engagement, I think it was allowed us to really create a partnership and a team approach that was different than what I've seen in other spaces. Before I was doing work in Newark Community Solutions in the court, I was working in the prison system. And that team, building that team approach really was a little bit harder for us to build. And without that kind of engagement, without sitting next to somebody and saying, how do we problem solve this, created some of those barriers. And then I think the second thing that is important to remember is our clients are programmed out. And especially if you're on the reentry side, they have done probably MRT, they have probably done Thinking for Change, they have done every life skills group, they've done job readiness 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And now they're coming home and they're being offered another program. And so I think sometimes the humility that it takes for us as helpers to say, you've done this before, you know what you need. I know you've done a ton of programs, but here's how we can assist. Is this something for you is important to remember as well. And so that how we deliver it, how we market the work that we do. If we cannot call it a program, that is fantastic. Be innovative with our language. It can be really powerful.
I know, Judge Aiken, you've had some experience in that regard, so why don't you share some of your thoughts?
I also want to tell you that we were part of the quality improvement program with the FJC, and that self-evaluation all the time and trying to do better work, not settling, is very, very important. And the FJC does a fabulous job. So if you have a program, I strongly recommend staying with it. And we still go back and talk about ways we need to improve. It's constantly about improvement. The second thing I would tell you is the judges, our court, we have a Portland program, we have one in Eugene and one in Medford. Those are our 3 major district divisions. It's in our sentencing orders that people will observe reentry court. And every judge generally, unless there's some particular reason, includes that in his or her sentencing order. And they observe, because we want them to volunteer. We want them to sign up. We don't order them. We may order them to sit in, because how do you sell a program? We're going to more intensely supervise people. So we're looking at the people who want to buy in and really change their life and spend our focus there. And sometimes I've gotten some of the hardest people in the room to come in and suddenly realize they need this more than they had any idea. So we kind of have a waiting list so that they really see that it's exclusive. They really are going to not squander a spot. So I think that's been really helpful, but I think the court has come around to understanding that if we do intensive supervision on our high-risk offenders, we're not going to be sending as many. We'll still send people back to prison, but not as many. And that ironically, what gets in the way of their success are generally things that we have missed. And I can't not say enough about the trauma-informed work. If really, honestly, if you go back to the child abuse and neglect most of these guys have suffered, I can tell you there are honest conversations in the room where, for the first time, one of them, after being in prison 30, 25 years, will say, I was sexually assaulted by so-and-so and so-and-so, and just start sobbing and start talking about it, because it's a safe room for them. They're not going to hurt them when we're in that room. And then it's an epic. Courage is contagious. And what that's done is because we've had a trauma specialist and they've had these individual conversations, therapy sessions, they come in and it's opening up for other people, and suddenly the monkey's off their back. And for the first time, they're not using drugs and alcohol to blunt the pain of living through that experience. That's why they're using. I mean, it's all a big, the drug abuse and all it's a symptom. And so if you ask them, well, what was going on? Why did you use that day? They start telling you the emotional issues that happened, and then you deal with those issues. You need family counseling. your child is running away because, you know, you've not been a parent all these years and you're back and now trying to be a parent. And so we look at the things that we don't necessarily catch in the criminal justice system.
So Judge, how do you assess that, and how do you match that up with services?
One of the nice things about is I'm a student of services. I know my services in my community, and you get the best people around the table, and you ask them about where to go, and you research them. What it's done for our probation staff is they are really knowledgeable now about everything that's out there, and not just the same old contracting folks. They look for something different. And we have it's around the table, and so everybody there has over time learned different things in the community, and they go out and research. It's really a team effort. It's made all of our work, I think, much better because it's shared. It's just a shared experience, and it's our best day of the month, and it's our hardest day of the month. I go home after doing a reentry day. You're exhausted from actively listening. I hardly have to talk. It's actively listening, because they will talk to you in ways that I can't even begin to tell you if you just sit back and ask them, you know, open-ended questions, you know. Our warden came down one time and to sit in, and I told him I wouldn't call on him or introduce him until the very end, because I don't want people showing off and doing anything that is not therapeutic or not geared towards their work. And at the end, we walked out, we barely got the door, and the warden said to me, "How do you get them to talk to you?" And I said, "When we're in that room, we're not there to hurt them."
Right.
It's really magical about not hurting people, because you're there to help. Or kindness. Kindness is a skill that judges have so much power if they just use it. Kindness is really magical.
It can be overstated that really the pivotal part of the program is to have a judge that has that kind of attitude, right? Because, you know, we can have probation officers, we can have pretrial services officers. Devonna and Allison, thank you for the work that you do with us. But if the judge isn't there to show the softer side of the law and to help guide them along, you have more of an uphill battle. We have just a few minutes for questions. Any additional thoughts?
I have a question. I'd like to ask Judge Aiken. So what has been your experience with, I'll call them returning citizens who reoffend while they're still in your program? Are you flexible? Do you try to hang on to people?
I just toured we have a new warden out at Sheridan. I just toured, and the warden said to people, "Don't send them back to me. Figure it out in the community." I only send back the one, if they commit a new crime, a significant new crime,
Right.
that's different.
done, right.
But the little things we're gonna work on, and they're gonna get sanctioned. Some of them and it's very individualized. If they're a live in their head person, I make them get out in the community and do things.
Mhm.
If they're out in the community, not getting their things done, then I have other strategies. And you use, you know, it's adult parenting. I mean, you can call it social work, but it's really adult parenting. I mean, I want to give you a couple of examples. I have people in college now that never would have dreamed to go to school. Two really great stories. One is a guy who I sentenced to 15 years, and it was a Johnson case, sent back on a definition of burglary in Oregon. And he came in, I was to resentence him, and he had a huge criminal history. And I happened to have a group of students in the room, and I said, "Well, turn around and tell them what you think you need to tell them about how to avoid prison." And he was so articulate, he worked so hard at what he had to say, and he was very thoughtful. He turned around and I said, "Probation officers recommended time served, considered served. Done. And I want you to come into reentry." He came into reentry. I can't tell you how hard he worked. Native American background, very difficult abuse issues. I couldn't be prouder of him because he got himself an education. He went out to the community college, graduated from community college, transferred to the University of Oregon, has a degree now in family and human services, and has a job and comes back. Our people come back and mentor people. I have another woman who's now in a leadership program I came out of LA, returned to Ashland. She's at Southern Oregon University on a scholarship for innovation, business, and leadership. Remarkable. I mean, this is what we can do when we just stop and learn people, because they've been left behind.
Thank you, Judge. We're down to a couple of minutes. Any questions? Yes, Judge.
We started a re-entry in Asheville, and ours was much like yours, Judge Unger. We're only 6 months into it, and have had some challenges, and we're now incorporating the CBT. You mentioned that in your comments as well as you, Judge Aiken. Tell us, can you go into that a little bit more? How did you incorporate that? We're looking at, I'm interviewing now, providers to do that, but I appreciate any insights you have.
Well, MRT is pretty widely used in the federal system, right? It's got this strange name, moral recognition therapy, and it's a 12-step program. And when we looked around, we thought that was the most validated program that there was, and so we've been using it. Actually, John is a facilitator of an MRT group, also in addition to working with.
So your probation does that?
Yes.
I got you.
Right.
Yes.
Ours don't, and I don't want ours to do it.
Okay.
I want an outside provider who they can trust that's different, that gets different opinions, different roles. And so our treatment provider does the MRT work. And what I can see is a third leg of the stool in terms of honesty, because what they say there, what they say in treatment, what they say the probation officer, and then in the reentry court, we're checking all the time. And it has to be run by the individuals. The kid, they run it. And the participants really run it. And so to have a probation officer running it, when you have a treatment person, there's a different role. So I really think you have to be very careful who you pick to do that.
So you did yours through a third party?
My teaching is done through a treatment provider on a contract.
Yeah, right. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
I'm just gonna, as a therapist, there's a lot of buzzwords out there about evidence-based programming, and I am glad that the federal government is invested in it. As somebody who's been developing programs and writing programs, I think that we have to be careful about who we bring in to do those programs and what that means. It is not about just getting a 12-step program and bringing it in and saying, okay, great, we meet the criterion, we're checking off the priority consideration, and now let's move forward. Because these are programs that are evidence-based, but evidence-based for whom? And who are we testing this on? And then what happens if in some of the questions that we're asking clients that are part of the manual, somebody responds and they self-disclose something? You have to have a trained clinician to be able to handle that. So one of the things that I would say is I would highly recommend trying to either bring in-house therapists that you have on staff or partnering with outside agencies to create a very established difference between who's doing the supervision and who's doing the therapy and the assistance. Asking as well, is there individual-based services being offered? A lot of what we've seen in some of the studies is that our clients, especially who are coming through drug court programs, don't respond well to groups. And if the programs and the partners who you're working with are only providing group-based therapy or doing group therapy from like 9 until 3, it's going to be difficult for the clients to engage. So you want to be asking, if you're looking for partners and doing some screenings, do you offer individual therapy? How many sessions do you include there, so that people can also have the space to process what they might be hearing or learning in some of the evidence-based groups. Yeah.
Thank you. We've run out of time, but before I ask you to join me in thanking our panelists, I want to thank Rabbi Lipsker and Rabbi Boyarsky and the Aleph Institute for inviting us to be part of this conference and part of this panel. Judge Aiken, Colleen, Judge Ungaro, thank you very much. And